also be allowed the opportunity to go through this 2-week registration process. This 2-week registration process is going to start on the 31st of May, and it is scheduled to end on the 14th of June 2019. I want to make it abundantly clear, whether Venezuelans are here legally or illegally, once they come into the window of that 2-week period and they register, they will derive the opportunity to get a registration card. They will have a work permit exemption permitting them to work for a year, but not an automatic year. At the end of 6 months, they must come into wherever we tell them their supervisory officers will be. They must come and provide us with further information as what has happened over that 6-month period, and then they may be granted an extension for another 6-month period. So they will be those Venezuelans, whether you're here illegally or legally, once you register in this 2-week window, you will be permitted the opportunity to work for up to a year with a 6-month increment that you'll come in and report. We're going to have 5 designated offices during this period of time for Venezuelans to go in and do the registration process. We will have interpreters at these 5 designated offices. They will be in Port of Spain, San Fernando, Cedras, Arima, and Scarborough, Tobago. At this registration process, it will take place between 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. I foresee us doing a straight 14 days, no break for the weekend, from 7 a.m. in the morning to 5 p.m. at all of these 5 designated offices. You will be required, the Venezuelans will be required to fill out a form. We'll take their photographs, we'll take their fingerprints, we'll try to get whatever biometric data we can. That form that is being devised will include, they must provide some proof that they have come from Venezuela. They must provide their local address in Trinidad and Tobago, a local contact number, and at the end they will be swearing a statutory declaration that all of the information in the form is in fact true and accurate. Thereafter, we will perform as much due diligence as we can by through Interpol and the other international agencies that we have availability to their information, their database, including the authorities in Venezuela. If we find that persons have either spoken on truths or lied in their forms, etc., we will reserve the right to deport them. We are asking that they fill out these forms, provide the information, and they be truthful in so doing. They will also undergo a medical examination, and these forms are going to be designed to obtain as much pertinent information as possible. We recognize at that point it is the beginning of the registration process. We may pick up things afterwards. At the end of the registration process, sometime thereafter, they will pick up their registration cards that will have their photo identification on it and some form of security features to these cards as well. 2 of the questions that have arisen, or a number of questions that have arisen, asking what are going to be the further entitlements and rights of these Venezuelans who are registered during the 2-week period. I want to make it clear before moving on to that. If persons are not registered by the 14th of June, which is the proposed cutoff date, then the law reverts to them as is now. So you have an amnesty up to the 14th of June. You've registered. Once that registration period is over, we revert back to the laws currently exist. And we would ask that persons coming in, come in through the legal ports of entry. If you come in through the illegal ports of entry, we will seek to deport you. You can be detained. The normal application of the immigration laws will continue after the 14th of June. As I've discussed previously, this registration process is designed, one of the things we're trying to get out of it is a proper and an accurate reflection, the data collection of exactly how many Venezuelans are here. Now, we've taken a decision that the only free health care that will be permitted to the Venezuelans who register during this period will be emergency medical services. As you all are all aware now, in Trinidad and Tobago, any person who is in Trinidad and Tobago can walk into an accident and emergency department at any health center, any public hospital, and they will receive health care. So that will continue for the Venezuelans who are registered. They will also be allowed to get primary health care and public health care. And the definitions are, for emergency medical services, the initial treatment of acute medical conditions such as accidents, injuries, asthma, heart attacks, strokes, diabetic coma, infectious disease, and initial stabilization of fractures. So that's the emergency medical services. Under primary health care, this initial treatment and stabilization of cases that you walk in for, the emergency medical services. And then public health is access to health promotional material and immunization as per the national immunization efforts. Anything over and beyond those identified medical services, primary health care and public health, will have to be paid for. Another decision that has been taken by Cabinet today is that there is no guarantee to the right to education, training, or any other government service for registered Venezuelans. The language is very, very carefully chosen and specific. There is no guarantee to education. There's no guarantee to availability of training courses or social services. At the end of the day, those tiers of services, those types of services are provided for the nationals of Trinidad and Tobago, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, and in some cases the residents in Trinidad and Tobago. Furthermore, Cabinet has taken a decision that we are going to review. I have been mandated as the Minister of National Security to review the situation with respect to other categories of illegal immigrants here in Trinidad and Tobago. So we have heard what the population have said, in fact what some persons have said right here in post-cabinet about our CARICOM brothers and sisters and other illegal immigrants, be it from Cuba, be it from Haiti, be they from China, be they from African countries. So when I visited the IDC, these are some of the other nationals, non-nationals of Trinidad and Tobago, and categories of persons who were detained at the Immigration Detention Center. So I'm going to review the policy with respect to all categories of illegal immigrants in Trinidad and Tobago, including those who are detained at the IDC and those who may not be detained. And I will come back to Cabinet with a policy and suggestions as how we should treat with them. It is foreseen that that process, if Cabinet is so minded, and I think they will be minded to consider a policy, will also have a cut-off date. So none of this is meant to be a pull factor. None of this is meant to bring persons to Trinidad and Tobago. We are dealing in a humanitarian method and means with the persons who are in Trinidad and Tobago. We are not burying our heads in the sand and pretending it doesn't exist. Of course, we are all aware that the Venezuelan situation is the priority. That is where we have to focus our initial resources on. But I'm happy to say that the Cabinet's unanimous position today was we should look at all of the other illegal immigrants who are in Trinidad and Tobago up to a cutoff point, and how we should deal with these persons, be they from Africa, be they from the CARICOM, Haiti, other areas outside of Trinidad and Tobago. This is going to be a very intense project. It will be led by the Ministry of National Security. We're going to have the assistance of the Ministry of Health, the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, and it also permits the Ministry of National Security to bring in any other resources, be they private resources or public resources that we deem necessary to help us carry out this process. As I said, the registration of these Venezuelans will be valid, the work permit exemption initially for 6 months. Prior to the expiration of this permitted period of entry, migrants will be required to report to a designated Immigration Division's office, provide evidence of their employment, if they're employed, where their places of abode are, and other information which may then permit them to get a further 6-month period. So Cabinet has taken these decisions. You all will hear us communicating more and more about it as we go forward. And I ask, as I have your attention, that persons not continue trying to get in at illegal points of entry in Trinidad and Tobago. Come in, especially the Venezuelans, through the legal ports of entry. You will be dealt with. This is not meant to be a pull factor. We are going to deal with the persons during this 2-week period, registration period, but thereafter, the law goes back to the law as it is today, which is if you enter illegally, you overstay, etc., you will be in that category of persons who can be put into the immigration detention center. Thank you all very much for your attention for those two announcements. I'll take some questions.
Decision to not include education.
What the decision is not to guarantee access to education. It is well known that our education system is bursting at the seams. So the first priority has to be to provide education for our nationals and our locals. Thereafter, if there's availability, then the system can absorb it. What we have seen is certain private groups, including churches and other religious bodies, providing that service. At this stage, we can't open it. And I mean, after the registration process, we'll see how it looks. Right now, we're still dealing in an area where we don't have all of the facts.
Good afternoon, Rishi from TV6. Quick question. Now, just taking note of the times, and for 14 days, you're considering to have these 5 stations open, right? So, I mean, the initial estimate that we have of the number of Venezuelans in the country is 40,000. So looking at those 140 hours to process, let's say 40,000 or maybe
How you get 140 hours?
From 7 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Mm-hmm. 10 hours a day, correct.
Days,
right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
That works out to be processing about 285 persons per hour at 5 stations, which is like about 57 persons per station per hour. You think that that's possible given the number of things that...
One of these points of this whole exercise, as I've said before, is we're throwing figures around very, very loosely. I assume you're using a figure that the UN has quoted of 40,000 Venezuelans here. No one knows with any degree of certainty how many Venezuelans are here. This is the first time this exercise will be performed. As you work it out, if you spend 30 minutes at each station, it actually works out a registration of just under 30,000. It is not going to take 30 minutes at each station. You're going to have 20 stations at each of 20 booths at each of the 5 stations, etc. So we should be able to cover what needs to be covered. And let's take it from there. As we go along in the process, if improvements have to be made, they will be made.
Is there consideration for extending the 14 days?
No, not at this stage.
If they won't have access to social services or not guaranteed access to social services, will they still be taxed?
You only become liable to certain, so we're not going to ask that they pay NIS and NIB. Remember, this is just for the period of 1 year, and that is how you become entitled to certain social services when you contribute via NIS. It is really things like PAYE. Of course, you know that you have to cross $6,000 a month to be liable for pay as you earn. If they cross that hurdle, yes, they pay tax, etc. We can't open up to social services. That is to be determined. If you fall into the category, now it's going to depend on your employers. That obligation is on an employer. So if they know they're paying persons over the amounts that attract income tax, then they have those obligations. Just one at a time, please.
Streamline them into services, so will you have like maybe a job fair, or is it that, okay, you can't work now, go out and see what's there, go wherever's the help?
That is not part of this is our registration process. Let's understand the policy and why we're doing this. We are dealing with a live situation. We're dealing with a situation where there are a number of Venezuelans. No one knows the exact number of Venezuelans who are here. It was just thrown out a figure of 40,000. I've said before, the population of Tobago is around 50,000. If you go to Tobago and you imagine everybody in Tobago is a Venezuelan, that gives you an idea of how much 50,000, right? Every Tobagonian in Tobago is a Tobagonian, is there, gives you an idea of how much 50,000. We don't believe there are as many as that in Trinidad and Tobago. But again, let's deal with the facts. Let's go through the registration process. This is open for review as we go along. And what we're dealing with is a humanitarian system. We're not system and circumstances. We're not dealing with a refugee crisis.
Based on what you just said, it means that an employer will actually be saving money in employing a Venezuelan national.
How do you come to that conclusion?
If the fact that they would not have to pay the NIS, it means that they're now at a discounted rate in terms of, so it may be better to employ a Venezuelan person in terms of your savings. And the other question is, you now have to you now, based on what was agreed and what you said before, you will now have to send or release Venezuelans who have no criminal record out of detention center. Would that not be somewhat not balanced in respect to others who are there?
All right, Mr. Boris, you walked in late. All right, that was dealt with. So you will be happy to know, you've raised it now 3 times, you'll be happy to know that Cabinet took a decision, and it was, you played a big part in the advocacy, took a decision that I have been mandated to go now and come up with a policy to review the situation with respect to our CARICOM brothers and sisters, persons from Haiti, Africa, all illegal immigrants in Trinidad and Tobago. And what I said a short while before you came in is we're going to have the same cutoff point. That's the envisaged position. So we've heard what has been said. I said that before you came in. You've been one of the main advocates. I'm going to look at it, see what a similar proposal will be to deal with. Because as you've heard me say, when I visited the IDC, and as I told my cabinet colleagues this morning, it really is a small handful of non-Venezuelans here. And the cabinet was of the position, listen, this is a humanitarian decision. It should apply across the board. And that was accepted by cabinet. So we are going to deal with it. Thank you very much for your suggestions. Mr. Wilson, just one.
Most of the Venezuelans who are in Trinidad now speak Spanish. So therefore the question
is... As opposed to? They speak
Spanish
in Venezuela.
As opposed to English. The point is your message today going to be communicated in Spanish?
Absolutely.
Are you going to advertise in Spanish, social media messages in Spanish, and so on? Because otherwise, the message to the Spanish speakers...
Mr. Wilson, believe you me, up to this point, the message has been communicated by me in English. They have already heard the message. Do not for a moment underestimate how this message has already gotten across. But to answer your direct question, it is yes. In fact, about 3 weeks ago, I did a 2.5 hour program on ion dependency, dealing specifically with this. And we had an interpreter in studio. We opened up the lines, and 99% of the calls were Spanish-speaking persons. So we understand that the message will have to be communicated in Spanish. We have to be careful as to how we advertise, because at the end of the day, as I keep saying, this is not meant to be a pull factor. But yes, the message has to get across in their native tongue, which is Spanish, and that is going to be part of the process and the communication process. Because we have the whole purpose is to give them an opportunity to get the benefit of the 2-week registration process.
Who is assisting the ministry in that regard?
Who is assisting the ministry in what regard?
In regard to translating the message from you, from the ministry, into Spanish.
This is a decision that was taken today. So it now comes to the implementation side. Obviously, you will need interpreters to assist you.
Minister, will the CSO be involved in the registration process?
No.
Why not?
The CSO, what was the CSO?
Yeah. Central Statistical Office, if you're looking at stats and you're looking for some numbers.
But I'm not looking for stats. I'm looking at a registration process. I just want to know the registration. They can have, okay, but they can have the data afterwards. Everybody will have the data afterwards. This is the number of Venezuelans. If they want to go further, how many men, women, how many children under different ages, all of that information will be present. You don't need the CSO there for the registration process.
Can I ask a follow-up question? And it is, some of the Venezuelans will be leaving that country in difficult situations and may not have national IDs. What's the position with regard to that?
Again, that's why one of the reasons for having the form as a statutory declaration is that we expect them to provide all of the information they can. The due diligence process thereafter will include us communicating with the Venezuelan authorities to see if what they've provided is true. Listen, at the end of the day, we know there are going to be difficulties in this registration process. One of the difficulties I can predict now is certain persons may want to pass themselves off as Venezuelans, saying exactly what you said. Well, I've arrived here, I don't have identification. There are some Venezuelans who have arrived here and unscrupulous characters have taken away their passports, their identification cards, and have them in human trafficking type situations, etc. There is no perfect solution. What we're saying is let us get this done, the registration process, we're going to have to deal with persons turning up. It's the same thing like you turn up and say, I've lost my driver's permit, I've lost my passport. I had people this week asking me they've lost their passport. Say part of the exercise is you have to swear a statutory declaration that you did in fact lose it. You have to report to the police you've lost your passport, get a report from the police indicating or a receipt that you've done it. So there are going to have to be similar type systems. It is difficult because, as you say, persons could have fled, they could have lost it along the way, they could have traveled without identification. We're going to do the best we can in very difficult circumstances, understanding up front we are going to face certain difficulties along the way and we'll have to overcome those hurdles.
Another quick question, and it is that there may be trust issues with Venezuelans here, especially given the daylight murder of a Venezuelan national in Woodbrook last week. Could you address that, please?
I don't understand the correlation of the two. I don't understand the analogy. You don't know the circumstances under which I assume, if you do, well, you can come with me to the police after, as to why that particular Venezuelan, if, as Ms. Tiwari said, there are 40,000 Venezuelans here in Trinidad, one isolated incident doesn't make a 40,000. At these particular, let me finish please, at these particular centers, obviously we're going to have security in place, we're going to have the police as part of it, etc. At the centers. The trust issue I thought you were going to ask is, if you're here illegally, should you come forward and register or not? The answer is, whether you're here legally or illegally, come forward and register. Are there persons in Trinidad and Tobago from Venezuela who are engaged in criminal activity? The answer is yes. Are there persons in Trinidad and Tobago who may have been engaged in criminal activity whilst in Venezuela? I suspect the answer to that is yes as well. It's the same thing like when we have this conversation about fishermen being kidnapped. I don't refer to them as fishermen. I accept that they're nationals of Trinidad and Tobago. And I leave it at that.
The circumstance,
I come to you all just
the circumstance was a Venezuelan national was shot outside a UNHCR office in Woodbrook. So that's the circumstance.
Mm-hmm. But do you know the background or the contextual circumstances behind that? Because I am certain, I haven't been to the office myself or observed it on a daily basis, that there continue to be a stream of Venezuelans there. I know that office has been in existence for some time. I know the registration of persons at the UNHCR has been taking place for well over 2 years. That's the first incident and the isolated incident we've had. I'll leave it at that. Let me go to Ms. Hassanal. She's been trying her in the back.
Minister, in the past there were reports of exploitation by employers.
Correct.
What measures are the ministries putting in place to prevent this in going forward?
You can never prevent anything. All right, so it comes down to enforcement of the law. We can, as I announced earlier this week, I can put in place laws to deal with illegal firearms. It doesn't stop persons from walking around with illegal firearms. One of the part of the reasoning behind the registration process, and when going a step further and saying you will be allowed to work legally for the period of a year and providing a work permit exemption or in these circumstances, is to deal with the exploitation. So we're telling everyone out there, including the Venezuelans, via proper communication, if you're in a situation, because as we understand it, part of the exploitation is that if you don't do this for this amount, I will sell you out to the authorities. They will come and arrest you. The immigration officers will come and take you. The police, I will turn you into the police. This immediately eradicates that part of the conversation. Is it going to eradicate all exploitation? I wish I could tell you it would, but the truth is there are very unscrupulous people in Trinidad and Tobago and in our society who will exploit regardless. If we find those persons and they're committing acts, I would hope that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service do carry out their duties and do bring the necessary charges.
I'm forced to ask this question, and I do beg your indulgence. The fact that the NIS situation, which I just referred to a while ago, would be taken off the table where they are concerned, it may mean that the government may have to go to the parliament where the law pertaining to the NIS is concerned, and the compulsory part of it in respect to the payment of NIS for once a person is employed. And I'm just asking the question if that...
I don't know the answer to that. I don't think the government has to go to Parliament. In the first instance, as I say, this is a work permit exemption for 6 months and then a further 6 months. My recollection of certain other areas of law, for example, retrenchment and severance benefits, you have to be working continuously for a period of a year. I'm not sure what the law is with respect to NIS. Those are things that will have to be looked at. Also, don't just by saying persons are allowed to work does not mean they're going to find employment and going to work continuously for the period of a year. You're giving an opportunity.
Does the national minimum wage pertain to foreign nationals?
The national minimum wage will pertain in these circumstances because these people are being given the equivalent of work permits. They're not being given work permits, but it's a work permit exemption. And I was very careful to say, and the cabinet decision is that those types of, I'll actually read it for you. Where we say that there will be, the laws of Trinidad and Tobago will be applicable. Okay, Venezuelan nationals registered under the proposed, we have called it the MRF, which is the Migrant Registration Framework. All right, so that's what this is all about. Migrant Registration Framework. Venezuelan nationals registered under the proposed MRF will be subject to and protected by the material laws of Trinidad and Tobago, which protects citizens and residents of Trinidad and Tobago, as well as foreign nationals permitted to be employed in Trinidad and Tobago, thereby minimizing the potential for labor exploitation and mistreatment.
Is there a basis for the granting of the registration card and the work permit? Or is
There's no work permit being granted. I just said that 2 seconds ago. It's a work permit exemption. What you're getting out of the process is a registration card. Once you're registered, I'm going to exempt you in the first instance for 6 months from the requirement to have a work permit.
Okay, so is there a basis for it, or could we just say like anyone walking in will get this registration card? Because my question would be, what about those with criminal records? Like, what sort of checks are to be done?
Persons with criminal records, that will be part of the form again. Understand it is just like us walking in to fill out a form in a passport office. When you fill out the form and you put an address, there's absolutely no way that they check right there and then to see that that is your correct address or even your correct name. There's a process that takes place afterwards to do the due diligence to ensure that is correct. The same thing applies here. This is not a get out of jail card for criminals. If anyone commits any criminal act in Trinidad and Tobago, that registration card is not going to help you. You will be charged, you will be arrested, charged, and incarcerated. As I say, we don't know with any degree of certainty at this time who these Venezuelans are, etc. We will be asking Interpol to provide us with lists. We get those lists all of the time of persons who are criminals that are on watch lists, that are on flag lists, etc. If one of them comes up in the registration process, they will be detained, they will be held. But I don't think we can go further than that.
What happens if someone gives wrong information on that form?
That's why we've gone with the statutory declaration, and we specifically say if you provide us, and I said this a short while ago, if you provide us with lies or falsehoods or untruths, we have the right to deport you. It squashes the whole process. So don't come and fill out a form and tell lies in it. Because if we find out you've told lies, the social contract is over, off you go.
Minister, Prime Minister met with U.S. Ambassador Joseph Mondelo. Has anything come up? Has the U.S. position with regard to the stance on Venezuela changed, or do they both still agree to disagree?
What is the U.S. position with respect to Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela?
Is Maduro being the legitimate president?
But that's an American position. That's not a Trinidadian position. At the end of the day, both sovereigns, as I understand it, continue to maintain their positions. And as we have said, there's no Trinidad and Tobago's position is non-intervention, non-interference, no horse in the race. and no support for either. Let the people of Venezuela decide. And we recognize the legitimate government in the interim.
Could you give us some more color on the rationale for this decision? Because, and I'm asking
For which decision? The registration of the Venezuelans?
Yes. And I'm asking that in the context of the government being criticized for ignoring the quote-unquote humanitarian plight in Venezuela.
Criticized by whom?
Columnists, etc.
I'd like to know what the etc. are, but I'm not quite sure, Mr. Wilson, I understand the question. The government assessed the situation. As I said repeatedly, we don't have our heads buried in the sand. Things have worsened in Venezuela within the space of this year alone. We do see more Venezuelans migrating into Trinidad and Tobago. We would be foolish not to undergo a process that at minimum would try to have a registration and an understanding of exactly what we're dealing with. So that's the start of the policy. We certainly cannot be accused legitimately or justifiably of not being humanitarian. Anyone who says that, and I don't know who the columnists or the etc. are, but anyone who says that Trinidad and Tobago and this government of Trinidad and Tobago has not dealt with this situation in a humanitarian manner, I don't think that's grounded in fact. We've done the best we can in very difficult circumstances, and this policy, this MRF alone, is a clear indication of how the government intends to do. And thanks to us listening to persons like Mr. Boris and others, we've also heard, look, there are other categories of persons in Trinidad and Tobago and other illegal immigrants who will have different citizenship. What are you doing about them? And we thought this is an opportunity to take a look at that, to review it, to come up with a policy to deal with that, which may be along similar grounds.
In respect to the 2-week registration period, persons arriving after that will be subject to the normal criteria.
Correct.
But beyond that, those who are here, the 40,000 or 40,000, whatever the figures are, is there some system or program in place, like we Trinbagonians go to America or Canada on that agriculture program? Will there be any system in place to kind of encourage, motivate, or in terms of helping finding work for persons who into farming but really can't get at this point in time employees to do their various...
In Trinidad?
Yes, in Trinidad.
Yeah, understood. At the end of the day, this thing will develop. At the end of the day, you've raised a very good point. If there are persons who are interested in farming and increasing their farming capacity in Trinidad and Tobago, there is now an available labor source. So I would expect them, I mean, I know how private sector works, to go and approach and we will leave them to have that unfold as it happens in private sector.
Follow up on a question that I sent you a few days ago regarding children who were detained in some exercise either by police or immigration on a boat off, I think it was Muruga, and they are reportedly detained at a police station. Is this normal procedure? Could you just shed some light on the issue?
I don't know the circumstances that you're suggesting or that you text message me about. What I can tell you, and when I visited Cedrus, how it's being dealt with, is yes, initially when persons come in illegally, that is really an immigration issue. The police may detain them, immigration officers will then go there, they will make a call, the immigration officer, just the same way if you come into PRCO and you're deemed undesirable by the immigration officers, they can deport you. The immigration officers will take a decision as to how to treat with these people. When I was down in Cedrus, there was, for example, a young lady there with 2 very small children. I think one was 3, one was a few months old. And the decision that the immigration officers took is, look, so they were being detained, meaning they couldn't run outside in the police station. They weren't in a cell. And the decision taken was, we will permit you to go free, but on a supervisory order. So you have to turn up at the San Fernando Immigration Center on so-and-so days and just check in and these types of things whilst your case is being studied. It is an issue that we've had discussions with the Children's Authority on, because again, they are the ones who have the legal authority to deal with it. They quite simply are not sufficient resources in Trinidad and Tobago. They're not sufficient facilities to house children. I think, again, I actually applauded and commended the immigration officers for what they were doing, and that is applying a humanitarian stance. So don't go and put the women, children, and others necessarily into police cell. They had to hold them for a while, make your determination, send them out on supervisory orders. I assume that's the same policy that's continuing.
Influx of Venezuelans, migrants, children. Do you think that facilities need to be boosted? Because I understand that there are some child-friendly suites at police stations, certain police stations to accommodate them, but they had also been filled. I contacted the Children's Authority who said that they were also filled to capacity and couldn't accommodate these children. So are we reaching a point now where we have to build more facilities? I
just said 2 seconds ago, we simply don't have the resources and facilities in Trinidad and Tobago. There are some police stations, so for example, the Shervan police station that we recently opened in Tobago, where there is a whole section for young offenders. The older police stations will not have that. Police stations are not places we want to house people in the first place. For breach of immigration laws, that's supposed to be the Immigration Detention Center. We are looking at expanding facilities. These things do not happen overnight. Part of the reason for this registration process is to deal with the immediate, which includes children. No one wants young, innocent children detained in any facility. So Children's Authority would have very specific cases. It may be children who've been abused. They will be in different housing facilities to those who are young offenders. So you have to categorize. I assume that the vast majority of illegal immigrant children are not offenders. So we have to find a way not to keep them in our system, and that's what this registration process is about.
Some apologies if you had answered this before. I know you said that there'll be checks on for those who may be wanted via Interpol, but what about someone who, given the landscape in Venezuela, may have committed a misdemeanor offense, theft, served their time, served their punishment, they're coming to register? Will that in any way affect their registration? If
that they have a criminal record? At the end of the day, under the immigration law, we still maintain a discretion as to whether to have somebody in Trinidad and Tobago or not. So again, it will be on a case-by-case basis. If somebody had served some time for a traffic offense or for something like shoplifting, you can understand how different that is to trafficking serious arms and ammunition, trafficking narcotics. If it comes up on the radar that you were in Venezuela trafficking arms and ammunition and narcotics, as the Minister of National Security, I'm not going to permit you to be here, and I will deport you. I never believe the final question, so don't worry.
Minister, in respect to guns are creating havoc in this nation, and we understand your passion now in terms of dealing with this situation. Last night, I think 3 persons were shot. The 3 of them are dead. I think 2 are, and 1's fighting for his life. Recently, this might be a little by the side. Recently in Europe, it is alleged that women had a protest without apparel because of the shortage of manfolk or the male folk, as the case may be. The fact is, guns are truly destroying the men in our country. This is a serious thing. A lot of young men are being taken out because of the use of guns. This morning, the Commissioner of Police said that he would prefer not to have the system that you recommended, which is the 3-tier system. But once you are held with a gun, because the purpose of a gun, he said, with 13 rounds can take 13 lives. So once you're holding a gun, you can literally take 13 lives. So once you have a gun, you would like to have no bail attached to that situation. Are you giving that consideration?
That is actually what I said. So I said it's 3 different suites of legislation. The first is no bail. You're found with an illegal firearm, you're held with an illegal firearm, your right to bail disappears. So once you're held with an illegal firearm, no bail, but the police have an obligation in a 100, because you can't hold a person indefinitely, within a 120-day time frame, prosecute the case. All right, let them be found guilty or not guilty. That's 1. So once you have an illegal firearm and you're held, no bail, no right to bail, You're incarcerated, you're out of the system, the police have an obligation to prosecute you. I am proposing within 120 days. 2, if you are a repeat offender, as we have many of these criminals, it's so ridiculous in my view. We have some persons, they go in, they plead guilty to an illegal firearm. A magistrate gives them a fine, a low fine in my view, $3,000, $5,000, it differs. Another magistrate may give them jail time, another one wouldn't. What I'm doing in those circumstances, I'm saying, no, these are the sentences. First time offense is at this level. Second time offense, significantly raised. Third time, I said strike 3 anyhow, but that doesn't mean you're in jail for the rest of your life. But it's a very, very significant fine and sentence together that you'll suffer. So that should be a deterrent. But the third part of it is that if you are actually out on bail and you commit a serious offense, immediate revocation of bail, your right to apply for bail disappears for a period of time as well. I have since added a fourth that I discussed, and the Attorney General is drafting it for me. In Trinidad and Tobago, we don't have a specific offense of trafficking in firearms, right? That shocked me. So we are going to come with legislation as well, and we're going to have a very low threshold. I'm going to propose, the Attorney General discussed it with me this morning, once you are held with 2 illegal firearms, I assume you're going to traffic, because it's not the wild, wild west with double guns on your side. And we are going to call that trafficking in illegal firearms, and again, put very proportionate, significant, hefty fines and jail sentences to it. That's what we're going to do with on the legislative side. So it does cover what the Commissioner of Police, you say I didn't hear the interview or wherever he said it, but I am going to be working closely, because at the end of the day, I am doing this in collaboration with the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the same way we did with anti-gang legislation, and they said, give us this, and it is going to help us in the fight against crime. Just as you articulated, I sit down there with them on a weekly basis, and I say, we have to do something to arrest, no pun intended, the illegal firearm scourge in Trinidad and Tobago. We have to hit back hard, we have to make it a crime that is a real deterrent. The sentences, if you're found guilty, a real deterrent. No bail. So you can't just go and commit these acts, you're out on bail, commit it again the next day. So we're doing what we can. And it can get pumped up, as they say. This is my initial feeling. But I am working with the Commissioner of Police on it. So if he comes with recommendations and they make sense, I will implement them. Let me take Mrs. Yes.
Yeah, just to go back to diplomatic ties with the U.S. I remember that Joseph Mondale once described TNT's stance in supporting Maduro as more deeply concerning. Based on the meeting that the Prime Minister attended, is it safe to say that all of those things are, water under the bridge, for want of a better term?
At the end of the day, there's a comment you're attributing to the Ambassador of the United States to Trinidad and Tobago. The meeting was a very positive meeting. There was very open discussion. What came out very, very clearly from both sides is that there's a lot of mutual respect on both sides. In relationships, you're going to have times where you agree to disagree, but we will continue to work very closely together with the United States. They continue to remain a close ally, both in law enforcement as well as in trade and these other things. I don't think the relationship has been affected negatively.
Also, just on a side note, as Minister of National Security, I understand that several fire officers staged a walkout at the Boba Fire Station today over complaints of bad equipment, and I think one of the representatives even said that as many as 7 fire stations may face a similar situation. Is there anything you'd like to say on that?
I was in cabinet, so I'm not aware of that which you speak. I'm not doubting that it happened. Again, actually yesterday I had an excellent meeting, not for the first time, with the Prison Officers Association. I've met with the Police Social and Welfare Association. I met with the Fire Officers Service Association as well. And I've told all of them have my telephone number. All of them can message me. I have received no message from the Fire Services Association about anything that you've just described. If there are issues, let's sit down and talk about it. We have difficult financial circumstances. The rest of the services seem to understand that. I appreciate the difficulties that fire officers will face, the dangers of them performing their duties, and we're in a dry season, which is traditionally and statistically where there are more fires. None of what you've just spoken about has been brought to my attention officially.
Minister, do you know if a registration system is in place in any of Venezuela's neighboring countries?
I am not sure. I don't know. I would be surprised if they didn't have it, especially like Colombia.
Secondly, have you or has the Minister of Foreign Affairs been in touch with our embassy in Caracas on the issue of the registration?
I have not spoken to the personnel at the embassy in Caracas, but you would appreciate this decision is literally hot off the press. It was only taken today. That will have to be part of the process, because especially on the due diligence side afterwards, we want to be able to communicate with the authorities in Venezuela with respect to personnel. So that is going to be part of the process.
As far as you're aware, the embassy in Caracas is fully staffed?
As far as I'm aware, there are staff at the embassy in Caracas. I know there was a sort of rotation taking place. I am not certain what the current status and the current number of bodies in our embassy in Caracas are.
If you'll have interim costs with regards to the registration process, a budget for this registration process?
Yeah, I have asked for I've estimated it and asked for an initial $5 million. I'm hoping that it will come in a lot lower than that, but until we get this thing going, that's the figure I've put and asked for.
Rotation process in the embassy in Caracas?
Yes.
Given the close-sized of the country, now that we'll be registering people to work here.
What does us registering people to work here have to do with our embassy in Caracas? There's absolutely no correlation between the two. What system?
That rotation system.
I just told you I understand there's a rotation system there. You know as well as I do that there are certain difficulties on the ground in Caracas right now, not so? Yes? All right. So you have to look after persons, especially our nationals and our staff in these areas and stuff. We have not closed our embassy in Caracas. We continue to operate our embassy in Caracas. All right?
This might be probably the most important question here, but
This is the best for last.
Given that Buju Banton's concert is coming up and his criminal record, will there be an exemption to allow him into the country?
That is squarely on my desk. Buju Banton falls foul of our immigration laws in Trinidad and Tobago. I have asked that it be conveyed to the organizers of the concert that they need to make an application to the Minister of National Security for an exemption. I can say at this stage I am prepared to give the exemption for the concert to go on. Okay, thank you all very much for your attention this afternoon.